Hello and welcome to the Overwatch League overview. I'm your host Fitz, and today I am joined by my co-host Robert.
Hello, hello.
This week we're gonna review some of last week's matches, like the Battle of LA, the unexpected victory from the Florida Mayhem against the Paris Eternal, and a very close battle between the Fuel and the Shock. Also, we're gonna predict next week's matches, so be tuned for that. Okay, first of all, one thing I didn't announce. The Atlanta Reign versus the Washington Justice. This is a quick thing we're going to talk about. So, of course, the Atlanta beat the Washington. That was very expected. But some of the reasons I did think they 3-0'd them were because of the hero pool effects. Corey didn't have one of his signature heroes. So, Robert, you can probably talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so what I found is that Corey, he was not in his form at all. He was kind of forced to play something he's not used to due to the fact that both McCree and Widow were banned this week. And if you compare to his performance last week against Fuel, he was, yes, they lost 3-0, but they were much more competitive than they were here. They were a bit behind, and you could clearly see that Corey just couldn't keep up.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, even though Corey did look decently good on the Reaper, especially just Tuba, their Doomfist player, just stood out. Even though they got 3-0, Tuba got a lot of clips for his highlight reel, a lot of 3Ks, 4Ks, so he did look very good, even though his team just completely lost. Okay, so let's see. The MVPs for this match, I just wrote down for the Atlanta Reign, Edison, because, who else? And then, of course, Tuba for the Washington. What else do you have to say about it?
Well, I think that Atlanta also really stood out in their performance. I feel like they played really well. They were very competitive, and they had really good play. And I think Washington Justice, even though they had the Corey downside, I feel like they could have done better because they just weren't playing as big or as well as a team. They just, you could really see that Atlanta had the upper hand throughout most of the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think that the Atlanta Reign, this week Double Shield was in, the Doomfist Reaper meta. This has been their strongest meta throughout last year and also throughout this year. So I think that if Atlanta were to face harder opponents in this week, in this meta, they would have come out on top as well. So it's kind of a waste for Atlanta to beat a team like Washington in their favorite meta. But I still think they just looked insanely good, which was very unsurprising for me, at least, because I'm a huge Atlanta fan. But yeah, so there's not much else to say about that otherwise than Corey just couldn't play his 2 hit scan heroes, and Atlanta got their favorite meta, their strongest meta, so no weird expectations there. Yeah, what else do you have to say about it?
Personally, I'm a bit worried for Washington Justice. Their performance hasn't been that well. They do have 2 victories to their name, but I really feel like it's not the fact that they're doing badly. If we look at each person individually, or each player as individually, they're doing really well. They're playing really well. But what I think is that Justice has brought in this team that doesn't really communicate and doesn't really put up a good fight when grouped as a team, whilst individually they're doing an amazing job. Personally, I think Corey is a really good DPS and deserves his fame because he stands out as a really good hit scan player. But what I think is that he can't adapt to the Washington Justice team, and I think he has a hard time adapting and finding his place.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've also been pretty worried for the Washington because, they looked very good at the end of last year, and I had a lot of good hopes for them coming into this year. And just every match, they just, this little bit, they just didn't step up enough. I thought they would do better every single match, and then they just dropped the ball every time. And in my head, in the back of my head, I still have this hope for them. But if I look at it realistically, I don't think they're going to come out on top on most of the matches they're going to play for the rest of the year. But yeah. Okay, so that's probably enough to talk about the Atlanta-Washington game. Next up, we have the Battle of LA, of course. The Los Angeles Gladiators versus the Los Angeles Valiant. This game was very close. One thing that I do have to say about this was I respect the Valiant for trying to make the Ashe work, because throughout the whole first match they tried to make an Ashe work and it didn't work. They still almost won, this more like despite of the Ashe instead of thanks to the Ashe. So that's one thing I really think stood out. But throughout the entire series, I think that the Valiant did better than expected, seeing that they played a complete off-meta comp against the hyper-meta comp that the Gladiators were running. So I think it was very well coordinated and very well played by the Valiant, that they still came out into a map 5 with a very off-meta comp against the hyper-meta comp of the Gladiators. So that's one thing I really think they did well.
I would personally agree. I feel like Valiant really spread its wings and showed its power, especially coming out with these crazy comps that we could see, for example, in Hunters, bringing out 4 DPS during GOATs. It was very interesting. But what I think is even more interesting is that Gladiators did a really good job, and even though they, as you said, they picked these hyper meta comps, they had a really tough time getting the upper hand on Valiant. They really had to step up their game and really play 100% in order to get the upper hand against Valiant.
Yeah, indeed. I think that it's very surprising that the Valiant came out this strong with a very, well, as you said, a very Chengdu Hunter-ish comp. I think it's very well that they did that. Also, it was clear that KSP just wasn't comfortable on a Reaper. That's probably the reason they kept doing it, because KSP is normally just an insane player on McCree, and of course they didn't have McCree this week. So I think he really tried to make some form of hit scan work, because he really just didn't want to play the Reaper. I think that's mostly the reason they did this. Also, like in the hero pool effects, Rhine was out this week, and Gig, their main tank, is a very good Rhine player. They put up a very good show against the Titans in the beginning of this season with their McCree and Rhine play. One thing I do think is pretty weird is that we haven't seen Gig since the first week. They've been bringing out Dreamer every single time, and I'm wondering why that is. Like, I don't know, it's weird. But yeah.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to say here is I really think Valiant are struggling ever since they lost Kareev, because Kareev was very powerful. His Ana was very powerful and very game-changing, and I feel like their loss was the loss of Kareev really is shown in the team. And what I think made the match also very close is the fact that Gladiators have been bringing in all these new faces, OGE, Birdring, and I just feel like they treated this match as a way of trying to learn each other better and to get to know each other and to know, okay, so OGE needs this in order to be good. So that's why I think it was so competitive, because Gladiators had like this brand new comp and this brand new team with so many new players, and I feel like they needed some time, and I feel like they in some forms also experimented just like Valiant did with all their crazy picks.
Yeah, indeed. Also, I think that we really do have to give the spotlight to the tank combo of OGE and Space. They've been playing insanely well throughout their matches. I mean, that's the whole reason they beat the Shock. Space, many people thought he was a Devo one trick for a very long time. And against their first match against the Shock, he was getting toe-to-toe with Sinatra on Zarya, which is very surprising, because I mean that's the name that Sinatra got playing his Zarya in Season 2. And Space just bringing him toe-to-toe and even beating him in some occasions just shows how good this new tank line is for the Gladiators. And I do think that McGravy for the Valiant just isn't on Space his level yet. Like, they could... McGravy is just... He's pretty good at Sigma and at Diva, but it stops there. I think that Space just has more flexibility and is just a higher rank player in general. So I also think that gave the Gladiators a big edge over the Valiant.
I also really like the performance of Birdring. Birdring's performance was
Yeah.
insane, and ever since he transferred from London to Gladiators, I could really see him shine. He was a great player on the field, and I think he is definitely the MVP for Gladiators.
Yeah, most certainly. I also think, I mean, I had him written down as the MVP for this match, and most of the matches that the Gladiators have played, I think Bergering just completely was able to pop off and just do his thing. I think that's been very underrated when he was playing in London. I mean, playing with Profit, just one of the best players in the world, and I think he really gets to shine on this Gladiator roster.
I definitely agree, but that doesn't mean that Valiant did not play well. They put up a really good fight, and I really think that they deserve to get the fame that they deserve. And one player that stood out for me was KSP. He played really well, in my opinion, because he didn't quite stand out as brightly as I would say Shax. But if you look a bit more closer at the gameplay, KSP did have some moments where he really shined.
Yeah, I had, for at least for the Valiant, I had Shax written down to be the MVP because he just had a bit more pop off. I think KSP was very good on the Ashe, but I think the Ashe gave them a bit of a disadvantage, and I think Shax was able to lift that disadvantage with his Tracer, Torbjorn, and even Pharah. I think he's very flexible and he played very well in this match, so I had him as the Valiant MVP.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, okay, so I think that's all for this match. Let's see. Yeah, no, that's all for this match. Next up, we have the Florida Mayhem versus the Paris Eternal. 3-0 for the Mayhem. Insane match. I was so surprised when I saw that the Mayhem just completely stomped the Eternal. So surprised to see that, especially seeing how strong the Eternal has looked over the last couple of weeks. I mean, they beat the Fusion, they went toe-to-toe with the Fusion the week after that, and it's just... I'm just lost for words that they just got 3-0'd. So, yeah.
Florida Mayhem, I feel like they have just fully stepped out their game fully. Because last season they were fighting for like 19th, 20th, but now they're 13th. And now that doesn't sound that high, but you have to remember that Paris is really high. They're 8th. And
Yeah.
And they played absolutely amazing. And I think what I saw during the match is that Paris really just, they didn't treat the Mayhem like they deserve to be treated. Mayhem played really well. They played really much as a team, especially the first battle in Oasis where Yaki gets a 6k slam and just wins the whole battle. That you could see how coordinated their team was, and it just shows how well the team is rounded and how they played. Whereas Paris, they were really disorganized, and someone that didn't really shine out, which I expected to shine out, was Nico.
Yeah. I agree. I think he really underperformed in this match. I mean, he did have... On Numbani, he played better, because that's when we started to talk about him. And then we started to pay a bit more attention to him. And I did see him playing better, especially in the first round when he went Pharah. I mean, the man was just not paying attention to him, just standing in this little corridor, just grouped up, and he could just lob in the rockets. But the match after that, they had their Sigma just focus him down, just distract him. And you can already just feel the difference that made. Just Nico just couldn't handle that. And I also think that on the May, he just got completely outshined by his counterpart Nyaki. Way better sustain, way better walls, and also just better positioning and flanking.
Personally, I think Nico just... I didn't think Nico played really well on May. He was definitely not on the same level as Yaki was on May. But as soon as he picked Pharah, as you said on Numbani, he really shined, especially on point A. Because when you looked at the match, you could see, wow, Mayhem just absolutely destroyed Paris. But then when they attack, they capture A faster than Mayhem did. And that's really interesting. Because as soon as Nico understands, okay, I can play Pharah here. Pharah is good here. And as soon as he finds that window of opportunity, he shines. And that's something I feel like Nico could really improve on, is to find heroes and know where they shine. Because like Nobani, when he picked Pharah, you could really know that, okay, he knew what's up and he knew what to play and he knew exactly what to do, where to go. He played perfectly in that case. But as soon as he switched to May, you didn't see that. He started getting into positions where he shouldn't have gone. His walls weren't that good, and I feel like he could play much better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that Nico just underperformed and just got outshined by Yaki. I think that Soon did play very well. I think he was the only one on the Eternal that was able to stand up to his counterpart in the Mayhem. I think that Soon was the only player that was like able to go toe to toe with him. Because BQB, he played very well. He popped off a lot, most certainly on Rialto. But I think that Soon was mostly just like the team fights that the Paris did win was thanks to Soon. Most of the time, at least. And I also just think that the Mayhem's tank line played around their DPS better. So that also enabled BQB to pop off more than Soon and Nico did.
Also, what I find very interesting is that Yaki played terrific as well. His walls were absolutely amazing, and he didn't have as shiny plays as BQB did, getting those amazing ults and just popping off. Yaki kind of enabled him to do that, and he gave him the path. So what I think is that in my opinion, BQB deserves my MVP spot, but Yaki is a very close one, and he played really well with his DPS teammate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think that Yaki deserved the Florida MVP title a little bit more in this match, but that's just my opinion. I think that he enabled the rest of his team to just pop off, most certainly just BQB. The ults that they comboed, the walls, the freezes, it was comboed very well, and it just enabled the rest of the team to just pop off. Also, one other thing I do have to mention is the hero pool effects on this match. Paris hasn't played Eggsy in quite a while. Soon has been getting the spot over Eggsy because Eggsy hasn't been able to play McCree. Eggsy is just an insane hit scan player, but this week he couldn't play McCree when they were down in the dumps and just couldn't turn it around. I think that Paris has been relying on Eggsy to pop off a lot. And in this match, they just didn't have that pop-off potential with their DPS. I mean, they did have Soon, who played very well, but they didn't have Eggsy to just pop off when they really needed it.
And I find this very similar to Justice, where Corey kind of got isolated from his McCree and Widowmaker. I feel like Eggsy also had the same part here. He also had the same issues here, where he found himself not being able to play his comfort picks. But what Paris did well is that they said, okay, let's bring our reserve DPS.
Yeah.
Which I think Justice should have done, because then they would have made them more competitive.
Yeah, well, one other thing is that the Justice their DPS line is very lacking. Corey is their only hit scan player that they have. I mean, we're trailing off this match now, but that's not too bad. The Washington just doesn't have other hit scan heroes. Corey's the only hit scan heroes, and for flex DPS, they only have Stratus, who can mostly just play Mei, a bit of Doomfist, a bit of Pharah, and then they have Tuba, who's basically Doomfist one trick, at least what I've seen of him. So I do think that the Justice can completely just elaborate their DPS line and make their team quite a bit better thanks to that. But okay, as long as you don't have anything else to say about the Mayhem and Eternal match, we can move on to the next one. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine. Let's proceed to the next match.
Okay, so the next one is Dallas Fuel versus the San Francisco Shock. I wasn't really surprised by a map 5 on this one. I did just expect the Shock to win because, I mean, it's the Shock. I do think that Fuel looked way better than they did in the beginning of the season. And I think that's because the Fuel was very confident. They just came off 2 wins against, I think, the Toronto and Houston teams. Not very highly thought of teams, but they're still wins, very dominant wins. Decay just completely carried them. I think that gave them a lot of confidence, and I think confidence is a very powerful tool in the hands of a team like Dallas. I think that makes just elevates their play quite a little bit more than they normally have. Also, I think that Note, their flex tank, he surprisingly stepped up on the Sigma. I've always seen him as just a diva one-trick. He couldn't play anything else. But he played surprisingly well on the Sigma. I mean, he most certainly not on an MVP level. Just Decay and Doa completely carried throughout the fight anyway. And I think that Shock just had better team play than the Fuel. I mean, Fuel just relies on their DPS to win. And I think that the Shock also have their supports, their tanks, who just work together way better to just bring out the result.
There's something very interesting I find is that Dallas Fuel haven't really been up to par to their last season, where they were kind of like the mid-level champions. Whereas now they're sitting just above Valiant in 17th.
Yeah, well, I do think that the Fuel are going better, are going to play better. I think they had a very slow start in this season, and I do have a lot of faith in them, especially how they looked in this match, to just win way more matches than they did before. But we'll have to see. I don't know what you think that the Fuel are how they're gonna play, how many matches they're gonna win, but I have a lot of confidence in them going forward.
I think Fuel, just like Valiant, are taking in the damage of losing OGE, because he's a very powerful tank. Yes. And I feel like they just have to adapt, and I believe that they have a slow start, and as soon as they get to know their new tank and they say, okay, we need to play like this, then I think they'll play much better and they will get to that mid-level position, which I think they deserve.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's nothing to take away from Gamsu. He's a very good main tank. I mean, just looking at him from last week on Shanghai, he completely popped off against the Shock in the Stage 3 playoffs. He played very well. But I do think that he needs to get settled in on this new team, on this Western team. I think that like communication and synergy is one thing that the Fuel have to get over, and I think they'll get progressively better and better throughout the season. The more they play with each other, the more they build up synergy. I do think that makes quite a lot of difference in the Fuel.
I definitely agree. Who are your MVPs for your match?
My MVPs, well, Decay for Dallas. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's Decay. Yeah. He's insane. Didn't expect anything else. Doa played very well. He was up to par with Decay, in my opinion. I mean, Decay just outshined him a little bit, in my opinion. But seeing how good Decay is, Doa played very well to also receive a spotlight during this match. So I do have to give props to Doha as well.
I definitely agree. I think Decay really deserves the MVP here for this match on the Dallas side, because he really enabled a lot of plays, and something really interesting is that both teams were very flexible, and they didn't see a lot of damage from this McCree Widow ban. They were very flexible, and that's what I think is expected from such high level teams, because we have to remember that Shock won last season. So I came in thinking that Shock was gonna win like 3-1, but Fuel put up a really good fight, and with the final score of 3-2, it was a very interesting match.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Fuel could have asked for a lot more. I mean, beating the champions, I mean, it's an angry Shock, because there was, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they lost to both LA teams. I think the Shock just got mad, and they played way better the last 2 weeks. They just wanted to prove they were still on top. I think they're starting to climb back up, and I think that the Fuel still played very well, seeing who they were up against.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Okay, so Shock MVP. I had Striker. It's kind of hard to point out an MVP for the Shock because Shock just they pop off as a team, if you can call it that. They pop off together. I mean, Moth also played very well. In the beginning of the match, he got like a 3K with his boop, I think, and you just have to give attention to the support line of the Shock as well because they're insane. I think that it's hard to point out an MVP for the Shock. I mean, of course, it's going to be a DPS because he just shines out more. But I do think that Striker did get a lot of spotlight thanks to the support he got from the rest of his team. His tanks made a lot of space. He got a lot of support from his supports. So I do think that makes a big difference.
Now, this is a strange part. I took Moth as my MVP because he was kind of the underdog in the team. Because healers it's a role that is really important, but isn't much respected.
Yeah.
And I really feel like Moth deserves respect and some attention from that game because he really shined. He did a really good job, and as you said, that 3K boop was really good, and the healing was really good, and I feel like that is what gave them their third point, or on the fifth map, because the healing was really good, and I don't think Fuel could crush such good healing and teamwork and synergy that Shock have in place. Famously.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, to be honest, I'm not very surprised to hear you say that Shock is or Moth is your MVP, because when I started watching the match, before I got to the end at least, I was thinking of putting Moth in my MVP spot as well, because I was just watching his POV in the league review app, and I was watching his POV, and he just played super well. He had especially just good positioning, a lot of spam healing. Even though he was playing Lucio, he knew when to amp up. His speed boosts were just super good, and his combos with Violet, just knowing when to heal, knowing when to speed boost, their positioning, even the damage he put out on Lucio is just, he played very well. I completely agree.
You could really see his experience on Lucio, and I think he really shines, and he's an amazing Lucio.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so next up, we have a couple of matches we're just going to skip over quite quickly. So next up, Boston against Toronto. Not much special here. I mean, it's two of the bottom-ranked teams. One thing I do want to discuss about this is just the Toronto Defiant. I'm very surprised to see them being one of the lower-end teams. Because looking at their lineup, they have a very strong team in theory. But I don't know what is going wrong every single time, making them lose and making them drop to the lower end of the standings. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, but that's what
I do.
What I think.
I think I definitely agree with you, and I think them having Kareev. I was expecting some huge Kareev plays, but it just wasn't present. And I think we have to give them some time, because I think they should be playing on the level that Fuel is, because they were competing with Fuel.
Yeah.
But now they're competing with, gosh, I don't know. They're 12.
Oh,
they're
Boston and Houston.
They're playing. They're on the level of Mayhem. I never thought I would say this, but Toronto Defiant is literally just sitting on top of Florida Mayhem.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that I expected more out of Kareev. This isn't in this match because they still won 3-1 and they played pretty well. But this is just in general what I've seen about them in the last season. I think that Kareev hasn't played up to par that he has been playing on the Valiant. And also, the tank line of the Defiant has just been meh. They haven't been outstanding. I think it's the DPS that has really shined for Toronto and that has given them those few wins. But yeah, I don't know. It's just Defiant has been meh. Their team synergy and their healing and tank line has they have just been meh. So yeah, I do expect better things from them for the rest of the season, but we'll just have to wait and see.
I think we give it some time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Okay, so next up we have the China games. We're just gonna go over these very quickly because once again it's rock paper scissors. Then this team wins, then that team wins, and once again the Shanghai do just win their matches 3-0. So that's one thing I
Very
yeah
good team.
one thing I have to take away from the China games are the Shanghai is still the top China team because like the Chengdu loses against the Charge, and then next week they beat the Charge, and then they lose against the Spark, and then they win against the Spark. It's just going back and forth, and Shanghai still shines out on top, just winning their matches. They've only lost one, and that's against the Hunters. They got caught off guard, but it's just Shanghai has been looking very strong. That's why I'm very excited for next week because we have teams like the Seoul Dynasty and the NYXL coming into China. So a bit more like we don't have to see the same four teams just winning and losing against each other and then just Shanghai winning. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Dynasty and the NYXL do coming into China. So that
For me, because
yeah.
I'm a huge NOXL fan, and it's also very interesting because Seoul Dynasty actually was the Seoul Dynasty lineup created NYXL, so it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so this brings us to the predictions. First up, we have Seoul Dynasty against the Huangzhou Spark. I still have no idea how to pronounce it. I think I did it well, but, you know. So in my notes, I had the Seoul Dynasty winning 3-0. It's just because the Dynasty have been looking very dominant in their last two matches against LA, and I just don't think that they'll drop a map against the middle of the pack team like the Spark are. I think that Dynasty are going to be one of the top teams in China, and, you know, not much else to say about that.
Quick check. Seoul is from Korea. That's
Yeah, I know, but they just moved to China, so they're going to play in the China region.
Oh yeah, right.
That's
Sorry
what I
for
meant.
that. Okay, well,
No problem.
something that I want to say is that I don't feel like Seoul deserves this number one spot for one reason and one reason only. They've only played 2 matches and won 2. And
Yeah, no, I agree. That's
that
true.
is the least. And they've won 2. And I feel like what's going to happen here is that Seoul Dynasty is going to come out at 3-1. I think Spark is going to be able to clutch out just 1 point.
One map.
Yeah, 1 map.
Yeah.
I feel like they are going to understand Seoul, and I think they're going to read some mistakes and find some victories there. So I think it's going to be 3-1.
Yeah. I mean, it's very possible. Like that one map that the Spark are gonna win, I'm not sure. I just put in 3-0 because I still think that the Dynasty looks very promising. But I do think that the Dynasty, the NYXL, and the Dragons are gonna be the top three China teams. And I mean, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Shanghai versus Seoul next week. I'm going to be very excited for that one because I want to see what the top China team is. I mean, we don't see the NYXL yet playing against those two, but
Yeah.
that'll come in a little bit. Okay, so next one, the Huangzhou Charge against the Shanghai Dragons. I think that the Dragons are going to win this one, but I do think that the Charge are going to take one map. Because, well, the Charge, they won against the Titans. That doesn't say much because the Hunters won against the Titans as well the day after. So I think that's probably a lack of skill on the Titans' end, more than the Charge beating them. But I still think they're going to bring out one map and then just the Dragons coming back and just saying, no, China is our region, and just win the map.
I think that it's going to be a 3-0 to Dragons because something that I have noticed is, or I think actually, no, I'll change my mind. I think it's going to be 3-1 as well. Because the reason I think Vancouver Titans lost is because I think they had a bad week. Every team has a bad week, and I feel like they had one bad week, and I think we just need to give it some time.
Yeah, I mean, the Shock had a bad week as well, so
Exactly.
not much to say about that. I mean, I'm very curious to see the Titans playing. I don't know when they're going to play again because they're not in next week, But I'm very curious to see them bouncing back like the Shock did. I do expect them to. But hey, we'll see. I don't know what teams they're going to face, because when they're facing the Seoul Dynasty and the NYXL, that could be very close matches. But that's that's predicting the matches that are going to happen, so I don't know. Okay, so next up, we have the NYXL versus the Chengdu Hunters. I'll let you start off with this one, because, I mean, you're a huge New York fan.
Yes, so. I think NYXL is going to bring this one 3-0. But, or actually, no. I think it's going to be 3-1. Because
I have that as well.
Due to one fact. Sabiobi is not going to have his Tracer.
Ooh.
And that's very sad for me, because I love watching Sabiobi play on Tracer. He's an absolute god on Tracer. And when he stated in one of his interviews that he's the best Tracer in the world, to be honest, I think I would agree. He's very powerful.
He's arguably one of the best ones in the league.
Yeah.
Or in the world, at least.
He is so powerful in Tracer. And having that Tracer removed from him, I feel like it's going to damage NYXL. But they have such powerful DPS, I think they can just swap him out.
Yeah, I mean, they also have Nene.
Exactly.
Play the McCree and the Widow very well. And Sabiobi hasn't looked that bad on the McCree either.
Yeah, that's actually true.
And also one thing, I do think that Sabiobi isn't on par of Nene's skill level when it comes to hitting shots on McCree. But I do think that the captain quality, the team leader quality that comes with Sabiobi brings a new level of synergy to the NYXL.
I agree, because he has a lot of experience playing in NYXL.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, okay. So I had 3-1, because I think that the Hunters are going to just catch them off guard for one map, and then the NYXL just adapting and just coming back for the reverse sweep. I mean, it's not really a reverse sweep if you've only lost one map, but you know what I mean.
I think it's gonna be 3-1 for a different reason. I feel like Hunters are gonna get the first map, and then they will start losing. So I think what they will do is they will play Sabiobi on the first map. He won't do too well, and they say, okay, let's bring out Nene. We switch out Sabiobi for Nene. Nene does his work, and then they bring out the 3-1. That's what I think will happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's very possible. Okay, so next one. This is going to be my key match for next week. The Atlanta Reign versus the Philadelphia Fusion. I'm so excited to see this one, because last week when... no, it wasn't last week. It was the week before that. When the Atlanta Reign faced off against the Fusion, it was a 3-2 win for the Philadelphia. And I was smashing my desk, because I wanted the Reign to win that so bad. It was so close. And it was just, I really want the Reign to clutch it up again against the Fusion. And this time, them winning. Because, well, I mean, the Reign is just still my favorite team. I do think it's going to be a map 5, 100%. Just doesn't matter what team wins, it's going to be a map 5.
I agree.
Very sure.
I agree.
And honestly, I don't know who is going to take the map 5. I put in 3-1 for the Reign just because I really want it. But to be very real, I don't know who is going to win this one.
I think Philly is going to take this one home. I think Philadelphia is going to take this one home, because they have played, 9 matches, and they have won 8. Whereas Atlanta Reign have played 6 and won 4. So that puts them on, which puts Atlanta Reign on a 66% win rate, whereas Philadelphia has above that. Let's just say that.
Yeah, better. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I haven't really liked about the Reign this season. I know they're a good team.
I agree.
But they have just been lacking a little bit. I mean, the 2 losses they did get were against the Eternal and against the Fusion. So they aren't too bad of the losses, you know? They're good losses, if you know what I mean.
It's hard matches. It's not exactly.
Yeah, it's hard matches, especially against the Fusions. They still looked strong in their loss. So I think I'm fine with how they stand right now. But yeah, so it's gonna be a map 5, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm scared because there's a very, very good chance of the Fusion winning this, and I really don't want them to win this. But hey, that's just biased towards
Biased
the rain.
opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so next up we have the San Francisco Shock against the Los Angeles Valiant. I think this is just gonna be a 3-1 for the Shock. I think the Valiant, they do have their McCree for KSP, so I think they're gonna get one map and then just the Angry Shock. They prepared for Valiant this time. I do expect that, seeing how they lost their last match against the Valiant. I think they're gonna be pretty angry and just preparing for Valiant this time and just beating them.
I think it's gonna be 3-0. Valiant.
Yeah, there's a very real possibility of that happening as well.
Valiant. I feel like they need another week. I feel like they're not gonna sort out all their problems and synergy in 1 week. I feel like they need a bit more time, and coming up against such a hard team as Shock, that is gonna be very hard for them because Valiant. I feel like if they want to learn to synergize, they have to play against a team on their level, not against seasoned champions.
Yeah, they're getting thrown into the deep in the pool immediately. I also think that because it's a team of rookies mostly. I still at least think that they have to practice more in the pro scene
but
to
that
get
makes
better.
It interesting because that shows the future of Overwatch League, because maybe these Valiant amateurs can one day go and or not amateurs, youngsters
rookies
or young stars, can emerge and become really powerful DPSs, tanks, or healers. So I think
I'm very confident in the Valiant. I'm very confident in the Valiant for the rest of the season because I do think they look strong. But I want them to win more matches than they have because they're a bit of a middle to low tier team right now, at least in the standings.
Yeah.
So I do want them to win more and get higher up in the standings, and I know they can do it if they just put their mind to it and just focus. Okay, so next up, we just have one of the China games again, the Spark against the Hunters. Not much to say about this. I just wrote down 3-0 for the Hunters. There's honestly no saying who will win this. I just think that the Hunters have looked better against the China teams. They have won more. Also, their wacky playstyle, I think it's just going to catch Spark off guard. And I think Spark is a good enough team to bounce back from that. I just think it's going to be a 3-0. It's a very real possibility that the Spark 3-0 the Hunters or any score for that matter. There's no saying what it's going to be.
Yeah, personally, I think it's going to go to map 5.
Yeah, it's also possible.
And then I feel like Spark is going to emerge as the catalyst because I feel like Hunters have played really well, and so have Spark. They have both flexed their muscles, but I just feel like it would be a very tough match. They'll both have to show their best, and they have to put in their hardest work, and I feel like only in the last map we'll find out who wins, and I think it's going to be Spark.
Yeah, one other thing I did wrote down, I'm just reading this now, which is a very strong point to the Hunters. Last week, the Charge beat the Spark, and the Hunters 3-0 the Charge. So this is once again a bit of a back and forth rock, paper, scissors-ish matchup. But I think that because the Hunters beat the Charge and then the Charge beat the Spark, the Hunters have the upper hand. But there's a chance that the Spark win. I still don't know what to think of these Chinese teams. It's just, it's one hell of a shit show.
I don't know. But that's what makes it interesting, is that it's always different.
Yeah, true.
It's diverse and it's always different. And that's what makes it interesting, at least for me to watch.
Yeah, I really love that new teams come to the China region now, because it kind of has been like the beginning of this season, just the same 8 teams just playing each other. And now it's probably like 4 or 5 in China. Just keep playing each other, which did get kind of boring. But now we have the Dynasty, the NYXL, and the Titans. in the China region. So next up, very interesting match. I think this is going to be my second key match of next week. The Dragons versus the Dynasty. This is just going to say who is the top China team for right now. Not counting the NYXL, because they don't have a match against either of these teams. So what do you think of this one?
I feel that it's going to be a very interesting match. Shanghai, as we have talked about before, they're really strong in the China region right now.
Yep.
They have played very amazing. They have really shown who they are. But Seoul Dynasty, being one of the more OG and well-respected teams in Overwatch League, also have their own reputation, and having this 100% win rate also makes them quite powerful. And I feel like it's going to be a very interesting match, and it's definitely going to go to the 5th map. And I feel even in the 5th map, there won't be a clear winner. I feel like it's going to be one team makes a mistake, the other team...
I was just about to say that. I think it's going to be the 3rd round of the 5th map, and then 99 to 100, and then one of the two teams just loses attention and something just snaps, and then one of the teams just takes the advantage. I think it's going to be extremely close, this one.
I agree. I fully agree.
Yeah, I had the Dynasty winning out, and that's because of one reason and one reason alone. They have Fitz on the McCree. And I think that Shanghai, they do have very capable DPS players. I mean, they have Fleda and Lip. Lip is also a very good DPS player for them. But I just think that Fitz will outshine these, because he is more of a hit scan specialist. I mean, he's also good at Doom, but hey. In the 2 matches that the Dynasty played, he looked very good on the McCree.
Yeah.
He was shutting down Mirror against the Gladiators and just shutting down KSP as well. So I do think that little McCree thing, that little McCree upper hand, is just going to give them that last bit that they need to win. This is very much a match to watch out for. So it's going to be very interesting.
Next one, another NYXL game. Charge.
Yes, NYXL versus the Charge. I have a very bold prediction for this one. I have 5th map, with the NYXL coming out on top eventually. But for some reason, I just have this weird gut feeling that the Charge are going to step up like they did against the Titans. There's no real saying that they did that against the Titans, or if the Titans just dropped the ball, but still. I have this weird feeling that the Charge are just going to step up and take it to map 5.
I think it's going to be 3-0. NYXL fanboy. But
yeah, to be honest, it's very possible that it's going to be a 3-0. I was just like, yeah, why not? I'm going to put in 5th map.
NYXL has just been... They have done so well. And I feel like because this match is later in the week, what I think it will give them to know, they'll get to know better the hero pool, and they'll see, can Sabiobi play or should he be on the bench? And I feel like that little experience will show them, they'll be more experienced, NYXL, and they will know how to play around the hero pool. Not that Charge won't do that. I feel like Charge will also do that, but I feel like NYXL will do it better and emerge as the winners. And I feel like it's going to be a 3-0.
Yeah, it's a very real possibility of that happening. I just wanted to throw in one weird-ass prediction in all of these. So I just threw in the map 5. It's very possible that New York's just going to 3-0 them. But hey, we'll see. Next up, it's going to be like a iffy match, but I do think it's Florida Mayhem against the Boston Uprising. This is just going to be a 3-0 for Mayhem. Like, Mayhem beat Eternal this week, and Boston is still the bottom team in the league, so there's no way in hell that the Mayhem are going to lose to Boston. They may drop one map, but I don't even see that happening.
I am so sorry to all the Boston fans out there, but I'm not seeing a lot of potential in Boston.
Yeah, me neither.
They have gotten the victory, to their all due of respect, but I feel like Mayhem, after their absolutely astonishing gameplay with Eternal, if Lightning strikes twice and they do that, against Uprising, I don't think they'll even get a chance to play.
Yeah, I don't think that the Mayhem even needs the level of play that they showed this week. I think that like if they play against the Uprising like they did against the Eternal, I think they're barely gonna drop a team fight against the Uprising. And I think if the Mayhem just treats this like a random match, I think that Boston is gonna win a couple team fights, but I still think they're gonna get rolled. So yeah. Okay, so next up, we have the Houston Outlaws against the Dallas Fuel. I had 3-1 the Dallas Fuel winning this, just because they looked quite strong lately, and they've also already won 3-0 against the Outlaws. I just had the one because there's a chance that the Outlaws will step up, but seeing that McCree is going to be meta again, and Outlaws just being horrific when it comes to McCree, I still don't know why they put Blasé on McCree. He's a Doomfist player. So I think that if they're going to play McCree, if the Outlaws play McCree, they're not even going to win a map. I think if they decide to go dive, which is going to be quite hard with Tracer out of the hero pool, and also Moira out of the hero pool. But if they decide to do dive, they have a chance and might win a map. But I think if they're going to play into the hands of the Fuel, with that playing Ryan, McCree, or Diva Zarya, something like that, I think they're just going to get rolled by the Fuel.
I think I would agree. And I don't think they're going to get that one map. I think it's going to be 3-0. Now...
Yeah, it's a big chance of that happening as well.
Last season, I loved Houston Outlaws. And looking at their comeback, going from bottom tier to almost coming to playoffs. It was...
Yeah.
They shined really hard, but I don't want to say it, but I feel
they're
like
bad this season.
I feel like those glory days are a bit over, and I feel like they just...
Like, here's the thing. Outlaws is a strong team, strong-ish. Outlaws is a middle-of-the-pack team when it comes to dive.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other meta, they're just... Sorry to say, they're just a bad team when it comes to any other meta than dive. So... I'm very curious to see how this is going to pan out, what the Outlaws are going to play, and how they decide to do this. But there's no way that the Outlaws are going to win this.
As well.
Seeing how confident the Fuel is.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to point out, is that Fuel are very powerful. They've played really well, and I feel like they're going to keep it up.
Yeah, I agree. So we still have a little bit of time left. So you said you wanted to talk about the standings. These are all the matches. So do your thing. Go ahead.
Well, I feel like looking at the Shanghai and Dynasty match.
Wait, I'll grab the standings real quick.
Yeah.
And read them out loud.
So right now, Seoul is number 1 with a 100% win rate. But I think is that if Dragons win that match, that number 1 spot is going to be very vulnerable to either Fusion or Dragons themselves.
Yeah, or Dragons themselves. Yeah, I also think that the Atlanta... I don't want the Atlanta reign to drop below top 5. There's a real possibility of that happening because they have to face a very strong team in the Fusion again. So there's a possibility that they drop out of the top 5. I mean, they drop a placement to the Shock, so it's not that bad.
What I think,
but yeah,
if I may say, is that Atlanta Reign is going to stay in that 5th position. Shock is going to come in 2nd place, and I feel like Dragons are going to come in 1st place. And I feel like either Eternal, Spitfire, or Titans will take that top 5 spot, and I feel like Seoul is gonna be 6th. Interestingly enough,
there's a real chance. I mean, Seoul is gonna get 1 win at least. I do think. I mean, it's just seeing how they play against the Dragons that decides their standings and just the way we look at them for the upcoming couple of weeks.
And that's what makes
the Seoul
match.
goes. Yeah, if Seoul goes 4-0 after this week, we're going to look at them as basically the top team. If they go 4-0, we're like, they beat the Dragons, they beat both LA teams, and then they beat the Charge. That's not a big accomplishment, but still, if they go 4-0 this week, they're gonna be the top team. I think they're gonna be one. Not even looking at the standings, just in your head how they look. I think that's gonna be just insane. But if they lose against the Dragons, that may drop them quite low.
And I feel like that added pressure when they're gonna, because I think all the CO players in the back of their head when sitting down and starting the match, they're gonna know, we lose this, we're gonna drop our number one.
Yeah.
And I feel like that
pressure,
and knowing this myself, for example, when you're about to drop a rank, you're so stressed and you just start making mistakes, and I feel like that's what's gonna tip over them, and I feel like Shanghai Dragons might capitalize on that moment and might win. That's what I think.
Yeah, I also think that's gonna happen. I mean, still big possibility of Seoul winning, but I do think that even though I think that the number one key match for next week is gonna be Philly against Atlanta, that's just because I really want to see how that pans out. I think that the most important match of next week is most certainly going to be Shanghai against Seoul, because that match is going to decide next week's standings in their completion. Like, it's going to change a lot seeing how that pans out.
For our final, I would say 2-3 minutes, I think we should say our team of the month, as we're coming to a conclusion to this month and our first podcast of the Overwatch League. I feel like we can quickly say the team of the month.
Yeah, I mean, sure, why not? I haven't really been paying attention to most of the players last month, but I do think that one of the better players this month has been Carpe. Yeah, no other reason, just because Carpe is the top player in the league right now, arguably.
Yeah.
So that would be the DPS one for me. Seeing how strong Yaki looked against the Florida Mayhem, even though they only played one match this month, I still want to put him in my team of the month for this week. And then for tank, yeah, that's just gonna be a difficult one.
I would say OGE.
Probably OGE, because I'm looking at the teams right now. There's not really any main tank that gets the spotlight just looking at the standings right now, except for OGE. So I do think that that's gonna be him.
One healer I think we can both agree on is Moth.
100%. But for the off tank, I'm not sure. You probably didn't watch the Shanghai games of this week, right?
No, I didn't, unluckily. I wish I could.
Yeah.
Didn't have time.
You probably should if you have time. But Void has been looking insane on the Sigma. He has been looking absolutely cracked on the Sigma. So I would definitely give him the off-tank position in the team of the month.
Now, that leaves us one more healer spot. Who do you think deserves that healer spot?
Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of good flex healers in the league. I mean, we already have Moth. Someone that can play BAP and Zen. That's mostly probably something we have to focus on. I don't think... For the rules, real quick, I don't think it's good to choose more than one player of a team. So because otherwise we can just pick the safe way out and just get Violet. Because, but I don't know.
I kind of think we have to say Violet. Violet has been really good.
Yeah, we kind of have to. But I just thought of one thing. Alarm. We can just pick Alarm from the Fusion.
Alarm is actually a really good one.
He's a very good Ana, Zenyatta. He's been playing extremely well over the last month. But, I mean, seeing that you haven't watched the Shanghai games, if you watch those, you'll agree with me, because Void has been looking insane.
I probably will.
But, okay, so our lineup is going to be Carpe, Yaki, OGE, Void, was it Alarm, and Moth?
Yeah.
That's just looking at that.
Team of the month.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of a dream team, but team of the month, at least, those are the players that really stood out in their respective role. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening to this one. Yeah, there's not much else to say, but we'll probably see you this Friday when we'll do our meta discussion podcast. And, well, yeah. See ya. Bye.